And I'd like to acknowledge that I'm joining you today from the land of the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation, and I pay my respects to Aboriginal people who are present here today and elders past, present and emerging. So today's seminar is actually co-badged by the Statewide Biobank and also by AIMOS, which is an organisation that I've been part of for some years. And so AIMOS stands for the Association for Interdisciplinary and Meta Research in Open Science. I think I have that right, Jason, but maybe I... And we are joined by Associate Professor Jason Chin from ANU. He's the president of AIMOS, and I thought he'd just say a few words about AIMOS and talk to you a little bit about some of the events that AIMOS is holding this year.
Yeah, thanks, Jenny. Very happy to co-badge this with you. As you noted, I'm the president of AIMOS. AIMOS is an organization whose primary mission is to improve science and research and make it more rigorous and transparent. We have a yearly conference, but we also run a Metascience seminar series, which this is part of. I just want to very quickly alert you all to the next seminar. I should also say that Jan Feld is here, who is the person who runs and curates our Metascience seminar and does it extremely well. And he's arranged for our next seminar, which is online, 4 p.m., April 23rd. I'll just put the sign up link in the chat. 4 p.m. Sydney time. And it's one I think a lot of you will be interested in. I think it converges with Fiona's talk a little bit. It's about a program that someone named Malta Elson has started to, so as you know, science purports to be trustworthy because it self-corrects, but there aren't a lot of incentives to actually do that, and he's sort of created this bug bounty system, so an incentive system to find errors in the scientific research, including perhaps fake participants. So I put the link there if anyone's interested in that, and don't want to take any more time, so I'll send it back over to you, Jenny. I think you're muted.
Thanks, Jason. Yeah, look, I think there's a lot of similarities between, the aims of AIMOS and also the statewide biobank seminar series, where, of course, biobanking, quality biobanking is all about improving, the reliability of research. So hopefully we'll be able to co-badge some future events together. Yeah. So now I'd like to introduce our speaker today. So we're very fortunate to hear from Dr. Fiona Giles, who's a research fellow from the University of Melbourne. And she works in the Safer Families Centre. So Fiona's work focuses on women's experience of domestic and family violence and how health services can provide appropriate and tailored responses. She also has an honorary appointment with the La Trobe Rural Health School. So she has experience in quantitative and qualitative research and conducting systematic reviews. She did her PhD at the Judith Lumley Centre at La Trobe University, which examined implementation of evidence-based intervention in a largely Australian government placement for initiative for children. So her interests include gender-based violence, rural health inequalities, and early childhood disadvantage. So I think particularly given Fiona's research interests, her work identifying what seem to be imposter participants in online research is, particularly troubling. So we're very grateful that Fiona can tell us about this issue, and we certainly look forward to having some discussion and Q&A at the end of Fiona's talk. But thanks very much, Fiona, again for joining us today. Thank you.
Well, thanks very much for inviting me to speak today. I met Jennifer at an ethics conference last year, so that was fantastic. And as I was saying earlier, I used to work in New South Wales Health, so it's wonderful to be back, albeit virtually today. I'm just going to share my slides. It worked earlier, so he's hoping it works again now. Can you all see them?
Yes, looks great. Thank you.
Awesome. So as Jenny said, I'll be talking about the identification and management of imposter participants when conducting online research. This is based on a paper that a few of us from the Safer Families team wrote, along with a colleague from the Department of Psychology at Deakin University. It was published early last year. So what are imposter participants? Well, they are people who falsify an identity or exaggerate experiences to meet the eligibility criteria for a study. And imposter participants can pop up in quantitative studies, in surveys, and also qualitative studies. And as we've discovered since publishing our article, they can be present in lots of different study designs. I work in the Department of General Practice and Primary Care, and we've had people encountering imposter participants in focus groups, in long COVID studies where they've falsified COVID tests. So there's no end of ways that people will try and fraudulently participate in research studies. And the reason they do that is primarily for financial gain. Although some people try and do it just to disrupt the study if they have an ideological opposition to the topic. It's worth mentioning now that it can also include bots, imposter participants. I'll be talking primarily about real people who are faking their identity or experiences, but bots are also a sinister presence in studies. So I don't think I need to state the bleeding obvious, but I will just go through why it's a really important thing that we need to talk about. So data integrity, as you all know, is absolutely foundational to the relationship between the research community and the public. And imposter participants really threaten that integrity of research data. So when we're writing reports for government or publishing findings on which decisions are being based, or on which funding decisions are being based, or even clinical decisions, people need to know that the studies and the findings that they're basing those decisions on are trustworthy, complete, and can be relied on. Ethical guidelines, the national guidelines and other ethical guidelines have traditionally focused on the conduct or misconduct of researchers, but we now need to think about the ethical conduct of participants for the first time. And as I said, reimbursing participants, so money is the main motivator for imposter participants. And although the national guidelines talk about reimbursing participants for their time, study resources are finite, and we don't want to waste precious resources on fake participants. We want to use them carefully and judiciously. So I'm just going to talk briefly about the current state of knowledge in terms of imposter participants. We published our paper early last year, and in the time between submitting and publishing, I think there are about 100 papers published on imposter participants, and there have been several hundred more published since. So there's been exponential growth in the published work on this topic. But most of the papers that are being published are people who have stumbled across imposter participants in their studies accidentally, and they write up their experiences of that and some suggested guidelines on, or the ways that they went about making sure that their final data set only contained genuine participants. But what we know from just the sheer volume of studies that are written about this, from the amount of people who have responded to my talks on this topic, from sharing our work on this topic on social media, is that imposter participants are highly prevalent globally. They are popping up in almost every online research study. They appear to be really organised and systematised, so it's not just a few opportunistic bad apples. These are people who are, have set up websites to share information about studies that are paying for participation. And there are groups who are really organised both overseas and in Australia. There are people who are professional research participants. What we also know, both from the research and from some experience within our department, is that using panel data, so that's external companies who source participants for you, does not guarantee data integrity. So imposter participants are infiltrating panels as well, and often the panel data is low quality. We also know that imposter participants are increasingly using AI to generate plausible stories without depth in order to participate in these studies. Finally, and importantly, the scope of this problem is likely to be underreported, where people are just encountering them and dealing with it internally within their study group. But the problem is still likely to be under-recognised, where people are publishing findings which contain imposter participants in their data set and not realising it. So I'm going to talk now about the studies where we encountered imposter participants. The first set of studies were quantitative studies. One was a set of online surveys called the Voices study. We did one survey with victim survivors of domestic and family violence and one with perpetrators. So we advertised them widely on social media and via a network of organisations, and we offered gift vouchers for participation. But within a few days, we had a large number of suspicious responses, despite having the Qualtrics software bot detection activated. We knew they were suspicious from the large volume of sequential responses a few seconds apart in the early hours of the morning. We had a disproportionate number of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander participants. There were many questions left blank. There were some inconsistencies across individual participant responses. So that was things like people who said they didn't have children but answered the questions about children, and there were some really similar open-ended responses. So what we did initially is we changed to an iPad draw instead of individual vouchers. We discovered that there were additional fraud detection features we could activate in Qualtrics. We introduced a pre-screening survey, which included a simple arithmetic question. We examined the metadata to look at patterns of fraudulent activities. And then we went through a really laborious process of manually checking all responses for conflicting or implausible responses. We also assessed the quality of open-ended responses. And for the randomized control trial, which I didn't mention at the beginning, which was we were trying to do a randomized control trial to look at the effectiveness of a kind of a low intensity intervention, early intervention with perpetrators of domestic and family violence. We ended up verifying the identity of those of all those participants through various different means. With our qualitative studies, there were 3 across 2 institutions. I mentioned we had a colleague with us at the time from Deakin. With all of them, we advertised on our research centre social media channels, and we offered gift vouchers. We directed them all to a pre-study registration form. And again, we had a really large number of suspicious responses, really similar patterns in terms of volumes. They were all providing similar patterns of email addresses and phone numbers that weren't consistent with the Australian format. So we were able to detect that they were either bots or non-genuine participants, but there were some we were unsure about. So we invited them to participate in the study, but when they turned up, when we invited them, they all elected Zoom for the interview. They all left their cameras off. The quality of the connection was poor. The English was poor. You know, all their sentences kind of trailed off and we couldn't really understand what they were saying. Some of their stories had some genuine elements, but they lacked depth, and we couldn't get really any new information out of them from probing questions. They all said they were born in Australia. Many said they were Aboriginal or Torres Strait Islander, which was really inconsistent in the context of other information that we elicited from their interviews. So we determined that they were imposter participants. So again, we stopped advertising on social media. We stopped advertising the reimbursement, and we implemented a protocol to identify fraudulent participants. We introduced, and this was very effective, a short screening telephone interview. And when we said we were doing that, people stopped responding to emails. Our Deakin colleague asked participants during the interview about local surroundings, like tell me what school you went to, tell me what hospital you had your child at, or what was the weather like, just to kind of catch them out. And of course, we excluded any interviews from analysis where we were unsure of their authenticity. I want to talk now about the impacts of having imposter participants in our studies. So I mentioned the laborious process of manually checking all the data. That did take days and weeks actually to go through and check all the data to make sure we only had genuine participants. So it's really time and resource intensive to have imposter participants in your studies. It also significantly impacted participant recruitment. So when I mentioned that we did the identity verification with the perpetrator study, that really put people off participating in our RCT. They really didn't like that. And it was a real disincentive for participation. But I think it's also mentioning when you're working with sensitive participants, sensitive populations, such as those who have been victims, survivors of domestic and family violence, they have a history of being disbelieved. So identity verification is not something that you really want to do because it just reinforces some of their previous experiences. So that's something we're still grappling with in our team, and we haven't quite resolved how we're going to do that in the future. The other thing it's worth mentioning is it really has an impact on genuine participant engagement and their sense of safety. I mentioned focus groups. So there's a colleague in our department who ran a focus group online, and 12 of the 14 participants were imposters. They left their cameras off, they only participated in the chat, and it made the 2 genuine participants feel unsafe and they left. For me, conducting interviews with victims, survivors of domestic violence, I'm trained to provide a real empathetic response and a trauma-informed response to our participants. But going into future interviews after having imposters, I was going in with a sense of skepticism and not sure whether the person that I was going to be interviewing would be genuine or not. And that really affected the early stages of those interviews with genuine participants. And that was a really hard dual kind of emotion for me to juggle, and I don't think I did my best work. Another impact is researcher wellbeing. I think I talked about how hard that was for me, but also there's a real kind of psychological harm when you know that people are faking their experiences or their identity. You feel a sense of, well, how dare they make up these experiences? And I think it's particularly hard for people with lived experience of the phenomena that they're studying. So if you imagine someone who's had cancer or someone with a mental illness, and you encounter an imposter participant making up experiences of those things, I can only imagine how difficult that is for them and the sense of moral injury that they have. And you just lose that sense of trust and safety when you're interviewing people. Finally, there's a real risk. There's a risk of career harm. There's a risk to projects if you don't know that your study findings are trustworthy and can be relied on. There's a massive organisational risk and trust in academics and in academia more generally. If we can't say with absolute confidence that our data is genuine. So, more broadly, what do we need to do when we encounter or to prevent encountering imposter participants? Well, our suggestion is that we need to anticipate and plan for the likelihood of imposter participants at the outset. They're so prevalent, they're so widespread now. We can't just hope that we're the lucky ones that don't have them in our studies. So we suggest a pre-study protocol for anyone recruiting online. Set up the software protections, none 100% perfect. We're still trying to grapple about whether we should advertise reimbursements or not. We work with a group of lived experience survivors who strongly feel that we should be advertising reimbursements, but there's no question that you're more likely to attract imposter participants if you do. Think about the type of reimbursement that you're offering. We suggest the pre-screening telephone interview is effective. So the way we use that is just say that we're calling them to arrange the interview time, and we get a sense of whether they're genuine or not through that. Identity verification we think is absolutely appropriate if you're doing studies with say, health professionals, but we're not sure that it's appropriate with victim survivors or with other people who may feel a sense of being questioned about their identity. And manual checks we feel are still needed, just to be sure. So in our department, we've actually established a standard operating procedure for online research and a checklist, which is now in place for everyone to use. But we suggest that this is needed more broadly. And so at an organisational level, we think that IT departments need to be upskilled to provide organisational-wide technical support. We think all ethics committees need to be upskilled so they know how to support and advise researchers in this space. And we think some accessible tools and instructions should be available to all researchers. And we also suggest perhaps an internal audit program needs to be in place. And finally, given how big this issue is, I'm just going to grab a drink. We suggest that the national ethical guidelines need to be updated. The national guidelines don't provide much advice at all about conducting online research. And there's, we're often kind of in a bit of a vacuum when we're doing this type of work. So we suggest that some guidelines in this space are needed. I also think, and clearly I'm quite interested in this topic now, I also think more research is needed in this space. I'd love to be involved in some kind of national global prevalence study. I think we need to do more of a deep dive into the harms and the impacts and support needs of researchers, but also ethics committee members. And to learn more about what the best practice approaches are into preventing, identifying and managing imposter participants. So I'll leave you with this slide, which is the dilemmas and discussion points for today, and I'd love to hear your thoughts. So I'm quite curious about who these imposter participants are. There have been some studies that have kind of confronted imposter participants, and so we know that sometimes they're international students who it's kind of become part of the gig economy. So they, deliver food, they wash dishes, and they participate fraudulently in research studies to earn a bit of extra money. There's one study in America who tracked down an imposter participant, and it was an academic who lost all her work during COVID. And so she freely admitted that she has participated in hundreds of research studies. Overseas, there's some evidence that vulnerable women are being trafficked into doing this type of work. So the question is, whose responsibility is it to investigate who they are, and whose responsibility is it to protect us against this problem? Should it be pushed back on researchers, or do we think that a broader response is needed? I've given this talk a few times now, and one of the questions that people are asking is it an ethics committee issue, or is it ethics overreach? Is it more of an integrity issue? And I guess my question is, does it matter? My view is that the ethics committee is best placed to ask researchers, if they're conducting online research, what are they doing to protect against imposter participants, and also provide some guidelines to support researchers. But I'd be interested in your thoughts of that. And the rise of AI. So we're being encouraged to use AI more at the University of Melbourne, and it's a tool that can be helpful, but it's also a tool that can be misused. So how do we navigate that space? There's the question of reinvestments that I've talked about. What do we do about social media recruitment? Do we go back to old-fashioned recruitment? How can we support researchers more systematically? And I think, how can we get this topic on the agenda of university bodies, national ethics bodies? And I'm happy to answer any other questions that people might have. So my final slide is just a thank you and some references, and that's a QR code to our paper if anyone's interested in reading it. So I will stop sharing if I can work out how to do that.
Oh, thank you very much, Fiona. Fantastic talk. I mean, I have heard some of this before, but I have to say I'm still completely stunned by the description of, a focus group where the majority of people are participants that just are imposters. That just must be heartbreaking, I think.
Yeah,
it
was.
For everybody. We've got a couple of questions. So people, if we'd like to ask a question, just pop up your hand, pop something in the chat. And I can see there's a comment from Thomas sort of talking about, professional clinical trial participants who might be in multiple trials simultaneously. A few people have kind of, given that the thumbs up. What are your thoughts on that? Like, I suppose some people could be conceivably, they could meet the criteria of multiple clinical trials, but then maybe some people do kind of, I don't know.
Do they meet the criteria for the trial? So are they technically imposters, or are they just finding a way to make money from
I don't know. Thomas, if you can come off mute, do you want to? Can you contribute? No problem if you can't.
Yeah, I mean, I can't contribute a huge amount of knowledge on the topic. It's merely a talk on this topic that I'd previously been to. There were some people faking eligibility for the trial, but for the most part, the only lie that they were telling was that they were not in any other clinical trials. So they would, get onto, there were some examples of people on half a dozen different experimental trials, often in phase 1. So this is just testing for a compound, whether it's harmful or not whether it's efficacious. And so, the main requirements are, do you have any pre-existing health conditions? Are you on any other trials? And they would answer no to all of those. But it can cause very significant, well, firstly, it can cause, incorrect data, but also, like, it's wildly dangerous in terms of the interactions between those compounds for the participants. And they were typically, this was mostly in America, mostly the unhoused population were the kind of primary people engaging in those kind of very high risk activities.
Yeah, I think I don't have a view except to say that there's broader issues around, who are these people participating, and it's often people who need money, and that's the broader social issue that's really concerning, I think. But that's bigger than us to kind of resolve. Yeah, I mean, that's why I'm quite curious about who these people are. It doesn't excuse the fact that they're, committing research fraud, but it's nevertheless a concerning social issue.
Oh, thank you. I might go to one person who's got their hand up, and then I'll come back to the chat. Zoe.
Yeah, hi. Thanks, Fiona, for that chat. I'm actually a PhD candidate and I work at the NHMRC as well in my spare time. And I actually am doing a a retrospective cross-sectional survey, which I was trying to do anonymously. And in my pilot, I identified some kind of issues that you'd sort of flagged, and I actually retrieved your paper and built in a lot of the checks that you recommended. So I guess one of the points I was going to make is how important it is that people publish on this subject, because I didn't have it flagged by my ethics committee. I had no idea it was an issue until I started to get my spidey senses up. And I guess another implication from my study that you probably didn't encounter because of the nature of your research, but we were trying to advertise our study as anonymous, so that people could provide their insights, more freely without concern. But once you have to build in some of these GeoIP tracking things, you can pinpoint exactly the location that the responding from in their IP. And that had implications, then I could go on to describe my survey as anonymous. So, there's so many ramifications for once you start having to build in these extra checks for what it means in terms of how you can engage with participants. And I think it's a massive quagmire. And separately in my role at NHMRC, I had mentioned it to my ethics colleagues because I found it interesting and said I thought it was something that we really needed to kind of get on top of. So I've actually, if you don't mind, forward them the link to your chat, to your talk today, and kind of get that conversation going on this end as well.
Yeah, great. I'm really pleased to hear that. I think one of the things I've really wanted to do is work out how to draw attention to NHMRC, ARC, in order to kind of get that conversation started. So obviously I've been talking to my university. I've been doing these talks, but I'm a early career researcher, small team, and not knowing how to kind of advocate more broadly has been one of the challenges. So I'm really glad that you've done that, and I'm really happy to continue doing work in this space. I've put in an early career grant to do some more work in this space, with a view to kind of hopefully doing a broader program of work. So if you could tell them that too, that would be great. Yeah, and I'm sorry that what I should have said at the start is I'm sorry that you experienced imposter participants in your study, because it really is quite unsettling when it happens.
I was fortunate to pick it up in the pilot, and I think one of the lucky things we did that made a big difference is we had a prize draw to start with, so the money draw wasn't as great to begin with, and we actually hadn't mentioned it in our ad or on the kind of landing page of the survey. So I think already that weeded out a huge proportion of our non-genuine participants. But it is a shame. It's like you said, you then lose one of your carrots for grabbing them as well. So it's a trade-off for sure.
It is. And you raised a really important question about you wanted it to be anonymous, but now you're identifying them through geochecking. That's certainly the issue we found with our RCT with perpetrators. It was still what we did is we said we're going to verify your identity and then discard that information. So you'll still be participating anonymously after we verify your identity, but that just didn't fly with people. You know,
they find it unsettling, or
they find
like
it really
some,
unsettling.
Yeah, some subterfuge going on, or yeah.
Exactly. They don't understand, genuine participants don't understand why we were doing that. Yeah. So you're right, it's an absolute quagmire in terms of how we deal with it. And I think not something that we've necessarily resolved yet. Like we're all still grappling with this. Yeah.
In the chat, I might
yeah.
jump to that. So from Panu, it's about, I guess, you know, the use of AI apps and platforms that actually say that people can earn money by participating in surveys.
Yeah.
Do you think is that something you've come across?
So I think that's probably the I'm not sure about the AI augmented platforms, but certainly that's where I think the panel data comes in. I'm not sure if that's where I'm not sure if that's what you're talking about, but definitely, you know, if you join Flybys, you can also kind of become part of a panel of surveyors, or Qualtrics actually has panel data that you can become part of. There's MTurk, there's a whole lot of ways of participating in surveys, and you get paid a pittance for these surveys, but people have done it just to earn a little bit of extra money, and it might just be, you know, $100 a week or something. But if you kind of are looking to earn some more money and you don't mind being a fake participant, you could potentially earn a complete crapload by doing heaps and heaps and heaps of these surveys. So I'm not aware of the apps and platforms that are AI augmented, but I think it's probably directing them to these panel surveys. Yeah.
And I guess also the use of AI, if people are using AI in their actual responses.
Yeah.
You know, like, are participants kind of encouraged to use AI? Is there any blanket ban on AI? What's happening at the moment?
So our experience is, so in our studies, they were really short but repetitive responses. I gave a talk along with a colleague from Murdoch Children's Institute who was saying that their open-ended responses were really long and detailed. So people are becoming more sophisticated in the use of their AI, thinking that maybe they can trick us better by giving longer responses, but they're really obviously AI generated. So yeah, people are using AI. So it says in the chat, people are actually using AI to web scrape for survey participation. So there's no end of ways that people will find ways to fraudulently participate in surveys and in research. There's one person that was telling me that she noticed imposter participants or in her survey, and then she got an email from someone a week later saying your survey or your study is being shared on a professional site. If you give me $500, I'll have it taken down.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
Okay. Oh my
Yep.
goodness me. Oh my goodness.
Yeah. And so someone's saying there's now more bots than humans on the internet. So yeah, I think bots are probably easier to detect than real humans.
Yep.
I think I don't know if that's true, but I think the reason there's such a high level of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander participants in surveys is that's often the first answer to that question. Yeah.
Right. Yes, I see what you mean. Yep. David, been waiting patiently. Thank you.
Hi. First of all, thanks so much for that talk. That was eye-opening and very, very disconcerting in many ways. My question has to do with the reliability of commercial recruitment bodies or websites. So, and this might not be relevant to the kinds of research that you do. So if anyone else has an answer for this, I use Prolific a lot. And they have different tiers of participants, including verified ones. And I'm just wondering how reliable that is.
So there are papers that have examined the quality of those data sets of people, and the studies have found that the quality is low. So I would suggest if people are using the commercial panels, that they still manually verify the data that they're using. Yeah.
So that tends to differ between different websites. So MTurk, for example, is known to be open. Like they don't verify anyone, but Prolific specifically sells itself as we only recruit real people. We also have different tiers for the quality of data they give based on feedback we got from researchers, things like that. I'm just thinking in this day and age, even that is becoming harder and harder to verify.
Yeah, so we've used iLink, which is another commercial one that, you know, claims that they check and verify people really carefully. But we still checked to make sure, and we eliminated a few people. And we still had some inconsistent responses and all of that. And people are inconsistent, so you can't necessarily eliminate them on the basis of that, because they could just be people, real people who are going through the motions. So I would still be checking data. I would be asking Prolific how they verify people, that they are real people, and also asking how they verify the particular demographic characteristics that people say that they are. Because the other thing I wonder about is if you're looking for particular characteristics, people might tick more because then they might be able to participate in more surveys. So, yeah. I don't probably know enough about it. I can only go on our experiences, and also on what the studies are saying. And I don't recall whether Prolific was one of the ones that they looked at. The studies that I looked at, they certainly found some had higher quality data than others. Yep. Yeah, but I would be asking questions rather than just trusting what they say. Yeah.
Thank you.
So if anyone else has a question, please feel free to pop it in the chat or put up your hand. But Fiona, I'm wanting to ask about when you think this problem started, because you mentioned, you know, that there's been a huge increase in sort of interest and number of publications in this issue. So people have kind of become aware kind of around the same time. But do you think this is a problem that's been happening for longer than we realise? And is anyone looking into that, like looking back into the literature?
Yeah, I think bots have been around for a while, like pre-COVID, but they were just kind of starting. So I have, yeah. So some of the literature was coming out sort of in a late 2018, 2019, where people were first talking about surveys and bots in surveys. But it was during COVID when a lot of people pivoted to online research because we didn't have a choice, and have stuck with online research because it's just so convenient, that it really took off. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
But I think
Right.
I think there's evidence of fraudulent participation even earlier than that, but it was much more incidental rather than widespread and systematic. Yeah.
Yeah, kind of driven more by individual motivations as opposed to something that you're sort of talking about is scaled and organized, which is I think
Scaled and
the
organised.
scary part of it.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. Another question, I guess, is you talked about this being underreported. My feeling is that some people might underreport it, like research teams might underreport it particularly out of embarrassment or out of their institution saying, for example, you can't talk about this because it's going to embarrass our institution, which only sort of serves to perpetuate the issue.
Yeah.
Do you think that could happen, or is that something you've heard of?
Absolutely. Or they think they don't want to write an ethics report because they're worried that there'll be some kind of consequences of that. I certainly know initially some ethics committees where, researchers were saying we've got this issue, and research ethics committees were saying, well, what are you going to do about that? Or they were saying, well, that's kind of a technical issue. That's not an ethical issue. So it's only really when people were reporting it as so often that it was becoming so common that ethics committees were kind of saying, oh, maybe we need to actually start doing something about that. Yeah.
Yeah.
But definitely embarrassment. Yeah. If like I can say for myself, I felt like an idiot, interviewing this person and all the way through whilst wondering if they were real or not, and giving those empathetic, trauma-informed responses. It's a horrible situation to be in. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And also giving them the money.
Yeah.
Like we did give them the vouchers for the first 3. Yep.
Yeah. Any other questions or comments? Well, Fiona, thank you so much for. Oh yes, Jason, of course.
Sorry, I didn't. Maybe you're ready to go. Sorry. Maybe this is a very obvious question, but I think Fiona, you alluded to the fact that this is illegal, right? They're kind of fraudulently misrepresenting something about themselves to get a gain. But I guess, of course, it runs into the same problems with every online scam and maybe paper mills where can't really enforce it, right? Because they're offshore, and like good luck trying to like convince some sort of multi-jurisdiction approach to this.
I know. Yeah.
Yeah, so I don't know. It's like I guess we're just pretty much assuming then that the legal system can't really help with this.
I don't think that's an obvious question at all. It's something that I've been pondering in terms of who do you report this to? Because, if they're just defrauding, $50 to $100 at a time, no one really cares about that. But and we don't have necessarily any evidence that it's widespread, organized and systematized, except for just the huge volumes and the people catching people out and saying, yeah, we do this, we do hundreds of these kind of stuff. So who do we report it to? I don't know. Is it the federal police, and will they laugh at us? I've been asking that question myself, and I'm really keen to know the answer. But I suspect, it might be 50 or $100 at a time, but if you multiply that by all the people who have encountered them, we're talking hundreds of thousands, if not millions of dollars alone in Australia. So like millions of dollars, hundreds of millions of dollars worldwide. Yeah.
I guess further reason to amass more evidence of the scale and how it works.
Yeah, that's why I want to do more research in this space. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Gabrielle.
Hi there, I'm Gabrielle John Levy. I chair ethics for Sydney Children's Hospital Network. So I'm really in probably awe of your research because I think it's well needed, and obviously I think it's a really important position that HREX needs to take to probably a bit, as Jennifer addressed, that challenge for researchers to actually share what these experiences are in reality, because without that, it's hard to be able to take that both to ministry and to things like the national statement to actually get an agreement for HREX to really think about how we support researchers in view of the work you're doing, to be able to put systems in place and advise them as to what I imagine most researchers wouldn't even know where to start to think about looking for clues, I suppose, as to what this might look like so that I think that's actually one of the very first steps, is actually helping researchers to identify how this might look in terms of data sets and analysis as they review it, because they're not specialists like you, or I think it was like Zoe who mentioned her work. So I think it's a really important thing. I too would like to share your presentation and might reach out to you in terms of, I know there's a body of work that's been done through the implementation science and some work with New South Wales Health, and how we can actually harness this to be recognised more broadly. So
Yeah,
thanks for your work.
Thank you. Yeah.
Thanks, Gabrielle. I think Fiona did say that she'd be willing to, like, we've recorded the talk, it will be posted, but I think you'd indicated that you'd be willing to share your slides. So even like a PDF of your presentation, that might be
Of course.
a useful thing as well. Yeah.
Yeah.
We've got another couple of comments in the chat. I think Thomas is saying, you know, obviously one of the challenge, obviously, of trying to work out who these people are is they're possibly not going to be very keen to participate in research about themselves, which is you know, it's an issue that affects, I guess, studying all kinds of dark activities, I guess.
Yeah, I wondered about that myself, but I wondered about the ethics of paying fraudulent participants to talk about themselves as genuine participants. But I'd be really curious to do that kind of study as well.
And actually, Candice has got a great suggestion here. You know, gifts that would be of value to only genuine participants. I think that's a really clever idea. You know, such as services for genuine victims, you know, victim survivors and things like that.
Mm.
You know,
Yeah.
it's an interesting idea, isn't it?
Often we offer vouchers that are only redeemable in Australia, but that doesn't seem to be a deterrent for overseas participants. I don't know how they get around that.
Yeah, yeah, you wouldn't know. Yeah, but it's worth. I guess with these kinds of things, we always say we need to think about all potential solutions. So yeah, some other interesting comments coming up as well about, you know, fraudulent behaviour and particular personality traits and things like that. But I wonder whether some of these like low-level scams, it is more, I think sometimes it's more opportunistic. You know, anyone can kind of benefit, so anyone can get involved. But yeah, definitely there's certainly research around fraudulent behaviour, particularly in terms of scientific fraud and personality traits. There's some work there, but yes. Look, thank you so much, Fiona. Thanks very much, Jason, as well, and AIMOS for co-badging this seminar. I think I can see that. Oh, Jan, do you want to say something?
No, I was looking for the applause button. Sorry.
Oh, there we are. Well, yep, we can have some verbal applause as well. But yeah, it was a fantastic talk. Thank you, Fiona. I'm sure that a lot of people are going to benefit from this talk, in addition to everyone who's been here today. Thank you so much for your work. Well done. Keep going. Let us know how we can help and keep encouraging you. And hopefully, you know, we can reduce this problem, because obviously it's a terrible problem for research, for funders, and ultimately for the people that this research is trying to serve.
Well, thanks very much for the opportunity. It was great to be here today.
Our pleasure. Thanks, everyone. See you next time. Take care. Bye.